Has anyone told you at the point at which infections reach a certain level or deaths a certain level that Greater Manchester will come out of your tier?
No, they haven't, Julia, and that's the fear about it, that we end up trapped in tier 3 or tier 4, which they're now talking about for the whole of the winter. And we think that could do severe damage to people's jobs, businesses, but not actually bring the cases down in the way that the government claim. And this is what we heard in our negotiations when we spoke to the experts, the chief scientific advisor, deputy chief medical officer, all of them casting doubt on whether the tier system will actually work. And I think this is a bit of a point of decision for the government. Do they carry on with this approach, or do we actually sort of look at something that might work, which is obviously a national circuit break? Now, nobody wants to think about that, but if it's going to cause more kind of benefit to the economy, if you like, by shortening the time that it's closed and do more for bringing down the cases, then clearly it's something that shouldn't be ruled out.
I have to say, when you were fighting these battles with the Prime Minister, I was away on my holes last week, but cheering you on, thinking this is brilliant. We finally got a politician on the front line who's standing up to the government, pointing out that the infection rate and the death rate in their area doesn't justify these sort of local lockdown rules. Turns out you were just concerned about getting more money for businesses, a totally valiant, a measure to protect your businesses in Greater Manchester. But how can you be opposed to tier 3, but you think that a national lockdown is a good idea? This is the bit I don't get.
Well, it's what the experts say, Julia.
Which experts?
The Deputy Chief Medical Officer, Jonathan Bantam, said to us that there were doubts about whether Tier 3 would actually work. Because he said, and I think the Chief Medical Officer has said something similar, you have to close lots of things if it is to create the break and then the drop in cases. And he was saying that he didn't think that possibly that was going to happen. So this is the point, isn't it? When you go down this regional route, you cause damage to the regional economies of England, but you don't actually control the virus. And that is my point. I think we are going to be damaged by our time in Tier 3. I don't think we have got enough funding to prevent that damage to our jobs and our businesses. And I am not sure that it's going to produce the drop in cases. And that's my argument.
OK, hold on a minute. So you're saying, look, this causes damage. Undoubtedly it does. I'm opposed to any second lockdown measures at all. But you're saying it doesn't control the virus. So how would putting, say, Devon and Cornwall with barely any cases of coronavirus, or London with far fewer cases than you have, why would them going into some lockdown measures for whatever period of time, why would that control the virus, but the Tier 3 measures wouldn't?
Well, you could have made the same argument in reverse earlier in the year, where London and the South had a lot more cases than the North, but we went into national lockdown because in the end, we're one country. And if the virus spreads in one part of the country, it will come to other parts as well. It went up the country earlier this year and it will come back down the country if we allow it to continue to spread through the winter. So that's the argument for it, Julia. And what we were told was that a regional lockdown is not certain to work, but a national lockdown is certain to work. And those were just the facts that those were the opinions from the experts that we were presented with. And obviously, given the people they were coming from, the chief medical officer, the chief scientific advisor, we found them persuasive.
Should we listen to the World Health Organization, who advise against national lockdowns?
Well, you've got a real point, though, in casting doubt on lockdowns per se, because they're almost becoming here our first policy option, when in fact, all along, we should have had a properly working test and trace system. That should have been the first line of defence against the virus. The problem is we don't have that. Here we are, months into this crisis, and we have a system that is offering minimal defence against the virus to local communities. And this has been pointed out regularly throughout this year, but I'm afraid it's still the case. So in that situation, when you don't have that first line of defence, you're only left with the sort of blanket, sort of sledgehammer options of regional or national lockdowns. And I think this is where we've got this wrong as a country. Other countries aren't having all of the lockdowns that cause so much damage, as you rightly say. Germany hasn't gone down this route because they have a properly working test and trace system.
OK, let's also talk about a new campaign that's being launched today that you're very much a part of, the Unite Greater Manchester campaign, or called 1GM. What's the aim of this?
Well, Julia, obviously we've had a difficult few weeks here with the concerns people have had about Tier 3, the effect on people's jobs and businesses. But what we want to do is kind of move things on, if you like, bring people back together and have a more positive, unifying campaign over the winter to help people and businesses that are going to be struggling. So all walks of Greater Manchester life came together yesterday. Gary Neville, Julie Hesmond-Howells, the Bishop of Manchester, some just amazing people who have got so much to offer. And what we're saying is we are all going to do as much as we can to help people on low wages who are struggling now because they're only on 2/3 of those wages and the place of work is shut. People on low incomes who are self-employed, so people working in the taxi trade or other areas, but also businesses that are now very close to the brink because of what's happened. And we've got an offer from our business community to step in and help as well. So it was, in difficult times, a really uplifting event. And I think we're going to have to face what is a difficult winter with this level of solidarity, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everyone listening will be very much in favour of that. Where are you in terms of solidarity with hungry children? The government is under a lot of pressure about the free school meals demands for vouchers from the likes of the millionaire footballer Marcus Rashford, who has really, brought the country together behind him about this. The government is saying they're not going to U-turn. They say that they've given plenty of money. Local councils, like your council in Greater Manchester, will have been given money to feed children during the school holidays. Do you think the government has done enough, or do you think they should do more?
No, they need to do more, Julia. So they point to this money that they've given to councils, but that ran out early October. So I don't know why they keep pointing to that. I mean, it was good that they gave that, but there isn't money now for this half term. So what we're seeing is businesses and councils, my own organisation is working with the co-op to give people, kids, access to a card that they can use to go into a store and get a simple meal. So, people are doing lots of things, but the trouble with just relying on voluntary action is that some kids will get missed in that situation. And I just think the government needs to rethink this one. We're in a national crisis. It's not normal times. Kids have got to be fed at a time like this. And I think the country feels that as well. So, you get the sense that the MPs on the government side are not happy. Why don't they just put their hands up and say that they've got this one wrong? Marcus Rashford, the power of the campaign he's leading is undeniable. Everyone is behind it. The whole country's behind it. And if the government gets behind it as well, that's one issue we can stop worrying about, given that we've got so many other things on our plate. Heading into November and December.
Is it worth pointing out that Marcus Rashford, one of the reasons why he feels so strongly about this is because he grew up the child of a single mum who worked, every hour God sends to try and put food on the table, but they still on occasion went hungry. But he did that at a time when, by the way, there was a Labour government in power for pretty much the entire time that he said he went hungry as a child. Do you think that the Labour Party has covered itself in glory in terms of how it has handled this measure over the years?
It did a lot to lift children out of poverty, but no, I've often been a critic of the government that I was in. I don't think they did enough to relieve poverty on a long-term basis in the north of England, but they did a lot of good things. And I'm quite proud of that, but I think also there's more that could have been done and more that should be done now. And I think this is something that's really important to say, Julia, about this debate, because you hear a lot of people saying, it creates dependency on benefits. The point is, many people like Marcus and his mum, they were working but not earning enough to feed kids. And I think this has got worse in the last decade. We've got a lot of people now who are in work, but they don't earn enough to be able to put food on the table because of the cost of their rent and all of the other things. And that is the reality for a lot of working people in Britain. So it's not so much about people wanting dependency on benefits. It's actually an issue about pay, in my view, and everyone earning a decent living wage so that they can afford to feed their kids. And sadly, we've allowed a situation to develop in this country where there are a lot of people who do kind of really difficult jobs, but still don't earn enough to cover the family bills. And that, for me, isn't right. So while, yes, we should have the sticking plaster, if you like, of government support throughout Christmas, and the quicker they U-turn on that, the better, I think we need a bigger debate coming out of this about fairness in our society and the gap between those at the very bottom and some of the excessive salaries earned by those at the top. We need to close that gap, make sure everyone earns enough to feed their kids. It's quite simple.